Hi, everyone. It's Reverend Dr. Katie, and I'm coming to you today with a really special message that's been on my heart for all of you for the past couple of days. This is about grief, and I know some of you may be thinking, "Why are we talking about grief in a group where we're talking about metaphysics and Christianity?" And it's for one simple reason: grief is energy. Absolutely, everything that we do is energy, from the way you move your body to the smallest gesture to the thoughts to your feelings to your prayers. Absolutely everything is composed of energy. So any grief that you have is also composed of energy. And when we don't take the time to grieve things that need grieving in our lives, that energy can kind of get stuck in our bodies. Yes, you just heard my dog agree with me when he shook his little collar. And that grief can get really stuck in our bodies. It can get stuck in our chakra points. It can get overwhelming for us, and it can keep us from moving forward in our spiritual lives. So there's a couple of common things that I see about grief. One, sometimes people dismiss grief and they'll, after a loss, like a month later, they'll say, I should be over this. But that's not doable for our human souls. We need a little bit of time in order to be able to grieve properly and grieve to really shift the energy that's within us, to recognize it and then shift it to new dimensions. Another thing I hear is that, well, so other people have it so much worse. So-and-so has it so much worse. But think about it. If you could find the person who has it worst in the world in terms of their grief, what good would that do you? It's actually incumbent on you to deal with your grief, to honor it, to mourn it, and to let that energy reside in you in creative ways so that you can shift it. And it's only when you can shift that energy, notice I don't say get it to go away, to shift it. When you can shift that energy, that grief energy on a metaphysical level, and help it transform you into new awakenings, into new spaces in your life to be able to soar in new ways, then you can really use that energy in creative ways and expand in your spiritual practices. This is what we kind of want to talk about just for a few minutes here. And hey, everyone that's joining in, I'm really happy to see you. If you have any questions, go ahead and write them down. So I asked a question a few days ago, which is how many of you feel like you do have grief that's unresolved in your lives? And so many of you wrote in with really poignant stories, with heartfelt stories, with sharing your vulnerability. And I want to honor that. I really appreciate it. That's not necessarily easy to do. And so you're able to recognize those spaces within you that are filled with grief. When we don't process the grief, and we don't do that for lots of different reasons. One, it can feel a little overwhelming, even though usually when we start to do it, it's a lot easier than we think it will be. Anticipation is much worse than just doing it. Excuse me, I know that from experience. Sometimes we don't process the grief because it happened when we were really young and no one ever gave us the tools, the opportunity to do that. And, this grief gets stored up and locked up in our bodies and in our souls and our spirits in strange ways. And if it's been like that for you since you were really little, or it's been like that for you for 10 years or 15 years, or maybe even 2 years, then you may not recognize what is happening as being unprocessed grief that gets stored and locked in your body because it seems normal to you. So another thing I see a lot is that people say, oh, well, no, this is just how I am, without recognizing that actually being in a permanent state of grief is actually not the way that God intends us to live our lives. God intends us to live our lives having the full range of human emotions, but not to stay stuck in any one area, because that keeps us from living into our full potential. If we are constantly if we're constantly in old energy that gets locked up inside us, that means we can't actually move on to the next stages. It means we can't unlock our gifts fully. It means we can't be of service to ourselves and to others as fully as we might be. So it's really important to begin that journey, to process that grief, to let it flow in new ways within us. Another thing that many of us are scared of is that if we grieve fully, that we're doing a disservice to the thing that we're mourning or to the person that we're mourning. It's so common. I've been there. It's kind of like when we're grieving, for instance, a romantic relationship that has ended. We think if we feel happy, that means that like that relationship didn't matter. But no, it was a point in our lives that's important and has gotten us to where we are. Another thing that I see a lot is that people often think the only thing that needs to be grieved in their life is the death of another person. And certainly that is deserving of our grief in every way possible, the loss of a human being. And no matter what happens to that human being after they die, we still miss them here on earth. And as Christians, we believe that they're somewhere really great, but we still miss them here on earth, and we need to grieve their deaths. But it's also really possible to have grief about life situations. I mentioned a romantic relationship that ends. It's probable, normal to have grief about the ending of relationships of any kind. It's normal to have grief about, for instance, divorce. It's normal to have grief about dreams that don't happen the way we think they will. And sometimes our life can be really fantastic, and we're still grieving something that didn't happen. And that's okay. That's actually energy. It's all energy that's getting stored up inside you in different ways. And when this happens, we kind of get stuck. Our bodies may feel heavy. We may feel as if we're kind of stuck in one place, or like we're treading water all of the time emotionally, and that we can't ever quite get ahead of that. And when we avoid the grief work, we may substitute alcohol, we may substitute sexual relationships, we may substitute other emotional codependency in place of honoring the grief process. And again, usually this happens, it's pretty unconscious. It's not like we make deliberate choices to do those things. That's all part of that energy. So that energy gets locked up in different chakras and different areas of the body, and then we're not processing and moving forward in ways that are most beneficial to us. So tell me if this is making sense. Tell me if you have any questions. I've sensed this because it's come up in lots of different corners of my life. And I've done different work in grief groups over the years, and just been present and to people in the middle of deep grief and helping shift that energy. And I've just seen how completely amazing it is when people who have been sometimes locked into grief patterns for years, sometimes decades, when they are able to shift the perception of their grief and give it and really honor it as a part of them and really move that energy around. Oh my gosh, they feel so much better. They feel lighter. They feel freer. They feel like they can move forward, like they can really claim their metaphysical gifts. So how this relates to us in every single way, I mean, it's energy, so it definitely relates to everything that we do in here. But many of you are ready to step forward. You're ready to soar. You're ready to really claim your gifts, but you have this part of you that's locked up in this grief cycle, and so it's keeping you from feeling worthy. It's keeping you from moving forward. It's keeping you from taking the next step. So if you do feel like this is you, and you're really ready to address some of this grief that's within you, reach out to me and let's talk about some ways to make that happen, because this is a really important step on your journey. You absolutely have to honor this process, and it doesn't happen just like that. It's a process, but it's a process that when you really kind of gain mastery over your emotions on an energetic and spiritual level, wow, you can release all of this, and that creates the space. Just think about it. If this is all locked up right here, let's say in your throat chakra, you remove that, or you don't really remove it, we transform it, but we remove the actual grief and it's transformed into something else. Maybe it's translated into your voice, speaking out into the world. If it's in your heart, maybe it's transformed into the way that you will be of service to yourself. Maybe it will be transformed into you being a healer for others. If it is located up here in your crown chakra, maybe this will transform into you receiving more clear and beautiful dimensions and visions and prayers. Maybe your prayer life will increase, and then you will therefore be able to serve yourself and others. So this is why doing the grief work and honoring the grief process is so important. And it's just been on my heart for many of you for the past week or so. And I feel like I've been touching on the pulse of grief in lots of corners of the world. And when that happens, that is a synchronicity. And I know I need to bring it to all of you. And so then I bring it to all of you. That's why we're talking about it. I've had my own grief journeys. I've been there. I've had to mourn the loss of people. I've had to mourn the loss of relationships. I've had to mourn the loss of things that should have been, things that I think should have been. And they've all given way to new, beautiful realities. I've been so happy that I've done that work because that's opened up my gifts in ways that I couldn't ever have anticipated. And I deeply want that for all of you, especially if you feel like grief has been holding you back. Okay, everyone. So if you have any questions, comment below. I see lots of people are here. I love sharing this with you. I am here, always here for you. Reach out anytime. You can private message me. You can reach me on email, katie@katievalentine.com. Just reach out. Let me know how it's going. I would love to know, and I would love to hear your story and where you feel like you are ready to process and move on to the next steps. All right, everyone. Blessings. I will talk to you soon.